flowers or 7 purities. So we have here the initial verse. With great blessings and samadhi and wisdom, we are replete with both feet. And so we have, well, Master often mentions about blessings and wisdom. So both blessings and wisdom, and then you replete with both feet. We can spread great Dharma by relying on the truth. And what is the truth? And I think we then need to, obviously the Buddha has attained the supreme enlightenment, therefore understood the great Dharma. And it teaches us to rely on the truth. And that's where it's contained in this great Dharma. And this truth cannot be found in samsara. So that's why we need to be liberated from samsara. With nobly purifying practices, we can reach a state of stillness and clarity. And why we need to have nobly purifying practices is to remove those encrustations from ourselves. And otherwise, we'll be constantly be disturbed by our own habitual tendencies. That's the reason why we need a state of stillness and clarity to realize the truth. So the Buddha abides in myriad practices and magnificent power, which you'll understand. So in Master's explanation, the two-footed honored one, referring to and often being referred to in Buddha's epitaphs, referring to both the blessings and the wisdom. Although I tend to describe blessings as virtues, because blessings is a function of walking the path in virtues. In a parable, though they are poor, they have an abundance of love. With nobly purifying practices, we can reach a state of stillness and clarity. So this parable obviously referring to the poor son, and they have an abundance of love. But if they go through these nobly purifying practices, like that includes ourselves, and we can reach a state of stillness and clarity, which means that we have to correct our habitual tendencies. So if one were to then look at it ourselves, as householder we are in practice. So in this particular lifetime, what does it mean for us in these purifying practices? So therefore, and we know that based on what you understand from the Buddha Dharma, we are very much encrusted, and our bags of Dharma karmic seeds higher than the Mount Sumeru. So therefore, it takes innumerable lifetime for us to go through these purifying practices. So in this short period of lifetime we have, we will then undertake to lighten that bag of karmic seeds by changing ourselves. So what are we changing? So we're going to change our character. So the visual canopy that all the brothers and sisters so much about, referring to the 4 infinite minds or the 4 immeasurables of loving kindness, compassion, sympathetic joy, and equanimity. That's the one that provides, with true compassion, provides the universal shade for sentient beings. And that's the bodhisattva path that we are walking right now. So hung with flower pennants refers to state we should interact with people in what they're living, for all embracing virtues of charity giving, beneficial conduct, loving speech, and collaborative efforts, which Master quite often mentioned. So if you look at it, charity giving obviously is for us to live our life for the benefit of others, and beneficial conduct in the ways that we behave, and that's why we need to change our character, the way we speak, and we've got to be in harmony through a collaborative effort in our practice. So these 7 purities, they which I listed down here, and I don't think I will run through this, so I'll leave this as for you all to read. And they're about the pure precepts, the great samadhi, walking the middle way, the truth, the truth of emptiness, and the truth of elusiveness, which was spoken about a couple of days ago. And practicing the great Dharma and the perfect and complete virtue of wisdom and realization of the true nature. And then the virtue of ending and forever eliminating ignorance. And obviously that's what we're undertaking to do, to gain the clarity, to think ultimately to realize our aspiration to attain the supreme enlightenment. So in the lessons learned, blessings come from going amongst people. We take other suffering as our own. This is what I meant by having unconditional loving kindness and universal compassion. And so in the bejeweled canopy of the four infinite minds, the first two being loving kindness and compassion. And so if we look at this, that if we undertake this is what we are supposed to be practicing in this bodhisattva path. And we can only realize this when we go amongst the people. And that's where, but remember that I mentioned earlier, when it goes among the people, what is it that we're doing? We're actually practicing the virtuous path. And that's where the virtuous path, and therefore blessings comes from there. So blessings is actually a function of the virtuous practice. So if you then look at it, the 2 feet being blessings and wisdom, I would also referring to virtues and wisdom. With samadhi, we can develop faith. With faith, we will be deep in our understanding. That's how we give rise to wisdom. So why did masters say with samadhi, we can develop faith? You see, very often, the way our mind works, we encounter innumerable thoughts that come to us, and especially so when we interact with the conditions and our skandhas will arise. So imagine if we constantly be in that state, there will be a lot, obviously there will be a lot of disturbance and distractions in us. And then how can we then develop faith? And that's why I say, unless therefore we need to still the mind, then we can develop faith. Otherwise, we constantly bombarded with so many things in our mind, creating a lot of doubts. Even we have the faith, our faith be overwhelmed by a lot of happenings in our mind. So I'm sure you have come across brothers and sisters who have a lot of questions about their own state of pain and own state of suffering. And then this is what it is. And unless we are able to be in that state, that faith will be disturbed. So when we have taken the Dharma to heart, and we can have precept, samadhi, and wisdom, which is the 3 flawless studies to protect ourselves. And this is necessary to protect ourselves because then we undertake precept so that we prevent us from doing bad things, and the samadhi of the stillness, so that we don't get easily distracted by all the worldly matters, and that's why we can grow in wisdom, and that's how we protect ourselves. So these four infinite minds can go among people, be safe and sound, and that's what we should be doing in our practice, in our life, and all the activities that we do actually in searching. So it is like being covered by the bejeweled canopy, and therefore, when we walk the path, we constantly have these 4 infinite minds with us, like what Brother Alex Ali said, that is with the bodhicitta mind in us. So when we have the bodhicitta mind, we will always have bodhicitta intention or motivation in everything that we say and everything that we do. and it's for the benefit of others, isn't it? Because the loving kindness, compassion, spirit, joy, it's for the benefit of others. So with the merits and virtues of wholeheartedly engaging in mindful practices, which means our minds are focused on one thing, which one thought, we can accomplish many things. So of course accomplish many things, which is the mindful practices. But then you look at it a bit paradoxical, when there's so many things, then how can we focus on one thing? But very often the way we live our life, especially life as an householder, because so many things we are doing, got to work, at play, with family, we've got friends, we've got a pandemic to look after, we're concerned, we've got cooking to do, lunch, dinner, breakfast to prepare. There's so many things that we have to do. So the minds have to so be focused on one thing. But the way the worldly mind works, and the rest of mundane consciousness is, we are focused on family matters, that doesn't matter. But if you get into the practice, and the one thing we need to be focusing on is the great Dharma. And then the one thought is that of the truth, that we can accomplish many things. So therefore, this many things, even that we do in our daily life, whether it's at work, whether we are cooking or anything else, if we can do that in practice, so we can cook mindfully, we can eat mindfully, for example, or express your gratitude, the food that you have on the table. And these are very many minor practices, but it's only focused on one, which is that of the Buddha Dharma. So therefore, in contemplation, the worldly or mundane consciousness is filled with sensation, which I just mentioned before. Why the sensation? Because we have to encounter the worldly winds that's blown at us constantly. And because of our habitual tendencies, we'll tend to react, and that will arouse two things. One is our desire, two is our emotion. So that contaminates the purity of knowing. So when that is being contaminated with sprinkles of desire, emotion, in an emotion, and how can we then be able to understand well what the teachings are, and how can we then be adopting the teachings or the Dharma into our practice? I find it very difficult. So a knowing then becomes a contaminated understanding. And that is often the case when sometimes when you talk to people, obviously when they listen, they have own understanding, because sometimes we contaminated by our own habitual tendencies, our own habitual biasness. So that understanding is real to the mind consciousness, and we got to be very mindful and not being unaware of that. But the truth is in the purity of that knowing. So you see, the truth, the whole truth, the supreme truth, and universal truth, the world did not know until the Buddha attained the supreme enlightenment. And so he propounded that, and it's given us the Buddha Dharma to today. Now, obviously, a lot of us we all are unenlightened. And and what we can only rely on is in the sutra. And obviously, the Chan practitioners like Huineng go into high contemplation to try to realize the truth. The problem is this: there's no, and they're not inadequate worldly words to describe what the truth is. So the truth has to be realized. So therefore, the truth means understand the truth cannot be explained. So when truth has to be understood. So when the truth is not well understood, it becomes a belief. So when a belief is not well explained and understood, it becomes a myth. And when a myth is not thoroughly understood and explained, it becomes a superstition. So you can see how superstition can arise, starting from what a perceived truth is, and eventually it becomes superstition. And because this is impossible, I'm sure you all have played a game, 10% standing online, a story being told by one person in the front, and by the time you reach the 10%, it's a completely different story. So on relationship, in understanding a relationship, when you understand the mind, you cultivate the rise above the mundane consciousness to accept the becomings. And all our becomings that come to our life are the unfoldment of our own karmic retribution. So therefore, every person that we meet, we have a reason to meet that person. So the phenomena of life becomings are intrinsically illusory. And this is about the phenomena of people, matters, and objects. So the phenomena of life becomings are intricately illusory because they are manifestation of our mind. So if you remember the fourfold mindfulness, the third of the fourfold mindfulness is, the last of the fourfold mindfulness is phenomena without self. So if phenomena is without self, where did it come from? It's a manifestation of mind. So if where the manifestation of mind is, and therefore it's illusory because we are unenlightened beings, which is from the mundane consciousness. So we must not then react upon. And sometimes that's why we see things, certain matters, something arouses, and we get very excited, we react, become angry, there's hatred that arises, and so on and so forth. So therefore, we need to understand that's why Mahaprabhu always say samadhi. Get control of your own mind, but to be filtered in purity. So that's why for us, when we see that, we need to then have the penetrative mind to see beyond the illusory. And that is always Master mentioned, is that is the wisdom. So we need to filter it in purity so they can respond in the know, and so not simply react to what arises in front of us. Okay, Kanan brothers and sisters, thank you.
Please accept our deepest Kan'an BrotherChin for the marvelous sharing.